Welcome along to the I Do Crew podcast with Jen and Emma. This week we're talking all things wedding fairs. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support every week. So thank you to those who have been here since episode 1. All that we ask is that you like, subscribe, rate and review our podcast on whatever platform you listen to or watch us on. And thank you for joining us. How's your week been?
Week. My week's been great, thank you. Spent the weekend at a wedding fair as a supplier, which was really good fun. We've done a few over the last couple of, was it 3-4 weeks? We've done a few. So it's really nice because you get to meet people that have just got engaged and different people in different stages of their planning, and you get to be excited with them and share ideas and see what they're planning. So yeah, I find them fun.
I also think that we learnt very quickly from particularly being a supplier at the wedding fair scene, do not presume who's getting married.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember when so as a supplier you tend to open, well, we definitely tend to open the conversation with who's getting married now, but previously we would just sort of, well, I would just sort of open the conversation with, is it your wedding that you're here for? And I remember that, and we'd spoken to a lot of couples on this particular occasion. This was earlier. No, this must have been last year. It wasn't this year. One of last year's wedding fairs, and I remember it being really, really cold. So loads of people were coming into where we were because it was quite warm, and we had a lot of time to chat to people because they wanted to stay warm in this particular part of the venue that we were in. We'd seen quite a few people, some people there with their parents, some people were there just the bride and the mum, some people were just the bride and groom, some people were there on behalf of other people scoping out the venue because they couldn't make it at last minute. So this elderly couple came through and I said, so are you here for one of your children's weddings, scoping out the place? They were like, no, no, it's our wedding that we're here for. Oh, of course it is. Never presume
No.
who the couple are that are getting married.
And also, if two women or males walk up to you, don't assume just one of them is the bride. And when you say, "Oh, who's getting married?" and they both say, "Oh, both of us," you've then got to play that limbo about, are they getting married together? Are they to one another, or are they just two friends that are having the wedding at a similar time?
The wedding fair that we did a couple of weeks ago, there was that exact scenario where one of them was really passionate about the bigger picture, and the other woman, so it was two women that we were speaking to. I think you had held the conversation and you started the conversation with them. One of them was really enthusiastic about the bigger picture, and the other one was much more about the detail and the budget and the scope and all of that kind of thing. And I didn't say anything because I wasn't 100% sure because I hadn't been there from the start, but I just presumed that they were a couple, female couple, scoping it out for their own wedding, blah, blah, blah. Afterwards, I was like, oh, is it their wedding together? You were like, no, no, that's the bride and her friend. I was like, thank God. I wasn't like, so it's your wedding that you're here for together?
Yeah. So when that's kind of top tip number one, if you're a couple going to a wedding fair, if you feel comfortable, be open about your relationship and what's going on, because it makes the conversation you have with the supplier much more authentic, because they won't be worried about saying something that might be wrong. Or so if you are getting married together and it's not obvious, just say, oh yeah, we're getting married together, we've been together 7 years, or whatever it is, just because it stops that awkwardness of the supplier not wanting to say the wrong thing but not really sure.
Although the best question that I found is, so who's getting married?
Yes.
You just ask it to whoever's in front of you because you can't get it wrong then.
No, we can't.
And what's the best wedding fair that you've been to?
I went to a couple when I was getting married, and I would say that they were pretty mediocre, but at the time I thought they were fine. But since going to one as suppliers, would now know what to look for. So the best wedding fair I've been to is a wedding fair that's in the south, and it's run by a lovely lady called Amy, called the Lo and Behold. It's called the Lo and Behold Wedding Fair, and this year was the year two. But what I find is special about this one is she curates suppliers, so it's not like any old supplier just turning up and buying their pitch. She picks them because they're super creative, and she holds collaboration spaces, so suppliers, so florists and cake makers um, and dress people all work in one area and set up a wedding. So it's a really, really visual place to get ideas, and it's a pretty wedding fair. It's not just lots of suppliers stood around tables, which is okay because it's a supplier you're going for, but it's it's not as visual. It's not as a special day.
And I think from our perspective, with our wedding styling and decor company that we run on the side of this, makes our lives so much easier because
Mhm.
we don't our stuff is our stand. So
Yeah,
if we're collaborating with a florist, maybe another prop hire company that or crockery or silverware, that kind of thing, if we're collaborating with other people, we can create a very real visual on what your wedding could look like when you bring the right suppliers together. And we did a wedding fair recently where it was just tables, and the wedding fair organizer was quite surprised that I said, "Oh, no, no, we don't need a table. We'll bring our own because our stuff is our stand. We can showcase better without a table." And I think if you're even if you're in the first couple of weeks, like you got engaged a couple of weeks ago, you just want to get an idea as to what tablescaping is or stationery, what that could look like. I think, yeah, Amy's vision for lo and behold, another wedding fair is just the perfect place to go if you feel a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit out of your depth, you don't really know where to start. Because as you said, it's a visual experience. And if you're not that creative, Amy's done all of the legwork for you. So it's handed to you on a plate to talk about color schemes, to see what options you've got. There's also so many nice suppliers. As you said, she curates them. So she brings the right people together to work collaboratively to provide such a unique wedding fair experience. I've honestly never been to anything like it before, where all the people that you meet, all of the suppliers, they get on really well.
yes,
There's no supplier rivalry or anything like that. And one of the things that Em and I make sure that we do from a Lichen and Lights perspective is if we're not the right supplier for you, we will definitely find somebody who is, because ultimately your wedding is the most important thing to you, and you should be choosing the right suppliers for your wedding, not the right price, not the right. Obviously, if you've got a budget in mind, you can work with the right supplier to fulfill that budget requirement. Most helpful suppliers will work with the budget that you've got to provide a level of service. And I think you really get that from Amy's show.
yeah. And she doesn't have, she will say no to people. So if she knows that somebody's got a bad reputation because they don't show up on time, or they overcharge or whatever, or they're rude, she
Or they
won't.
don't look after their staff, and if they're
Yeah,
not a good employer, if they're all about the gram but not necessarily about their service delivery.
yeah, she won't have them. So they're good because you can trust the people there.
They're also, from the conversations that we've had when we've been suppliers at these wedding fairs, that they are reasonably priced. So wedding stationery, when I was planning my wedding, I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna do it as cheap as I can." Luckily, one of our friends designed my wedding invitation for me, and we worked together, and it was beautiful, and I loved it. But some people that you meet at these wedding fairs, wedding stationery is their side hustle. It is their business, and there's one in particular. She's called Lullaby. Her wedding stationery is unreal. So many different styles. She's so creative, and she just puts so much effort and energy into your consultation. She'll make sure that it's the right wedding invitation for you that, as you've said, Em, before, sets the tone for your wedding. And I remember when we were at the Lo and Behold another wedding fair last year, she was on the supplier list, and I literally felt like Elton John was about to walk into the room. And when I met her, and I remember saying to you, "Oh my God, do you know who that is over there?" You're like, "No." I was like, "That's Lullaby. This is what she does. Wedding stationery, been following her for probably 3 years at that point. No idea why, but still follow her now, 'cause her work is just so intricate and detailed, and it can be as expensive or as cost effective as you want. She's honestly I had a proper fangirl moment. I think freaked her out a little bit, but gotta tell her, she's doing a great job.
Yeah.
What about your worst wedding fair experience, Em?
Um, Again, that is one where I was a supplier rather than a couple attending, but it was just it would have been a bit odd as a couple too, I think. I think it was all just a bit disjointed. And with a good wedding fair, you want a host of different suppliers. So you want a couple of photographers, a couple of cake makers, a couple of florists, a couple of wedding dress shops, so that you can get a feel for, because everybody's got different styles, and have a bit of a choice. There was big gaps. There wasn't a wedding dress person there. There was some people that weren't even local, which meant that if you picked them, you'd be paying more for travel and stuff. So it was just not very well curated. And the location was a wedding venue, but they hadn't thought about where to put the people. So we are decor, and we have a lot of big vintage rustic pieces, and we were upstairs, so we had to lug them all, and where we were didn't look and feel right. So it was the flow and everything was just a bit off.
Was this the Portrait of National Importance wedding fair incident?
Yes. But
So we were at I'm not going to name the venue, but it's a tourist attraction, would you say?
mhm.
And we, I think we went through a booking system. We had to pay as a supplier to be there. They'd promised high footfall of people who had booked their weddings at that venue, which as a supplier tends to be the best wedding fairs to go to. So as a bride and groom, if you're thinking about attending a wedding fair, if you're pretty set on what venue you would like, have a look or ask them the question, are you hosting any wedding fairs over the next 12 months, depending on how long you've got to the wedding, because they'll bring in their recommended suppliers, and that's people that have worked at the venue, know the venue, respect the venue, get on well with the venue management, all of that kind of thing. So try to pick your wedding fair based on your wedding venue, or if you're looking to book a barn or a hotel, have a look at wedding fairs in a barn, in a hotel, because it just gives you a feel of to what that venue could feel like with a buzz and with energy in it. So we'd paid to be at this wedding fair, and I think we hadn't agreed to do it last minute, but for some reason I couldn't be there on the day of the fair. I can't remember why. So I did the setup the day before, and then Em was coming to do the wedding fair the day after, and then I think I collected the day after that. I think that's how it panned out on the Sunday morning, early doors, I think.
Yeah, it was, because we didn't see each other at all that weekend, did we?
No. And the venue showed us to where we were going to be, and as Em said, it was up the stairs weren't of national importance, but they may as well have been. But they were up these very ornate, dark wood stairs. So if you drop a log or any kind of whiskey barrel or toolbox on these stairs, it's going to make a dent, and that dent is going to be light. So we had to carry all of the stuff through the house, which is fine. We didn't know that we were going to be upstairs, so we may have sort of changed the setup plan if we had, but we committed to having one of our hexagon frames there so that we could dress it in fabrics. We also committed to having a couple of areas styled, so a couple of whiskey barrels, a couple of, I was going to say that, no, I'm not going to say that. The pictures are available for you on our Instagram account. I don't know if we actually shared any of the content from that weekend. I can't remember. Um, and so we were setting up this hexagon frame. It was me and two of our lovely volunteers that come and help us for free because well, one of them in particular, Jeff, loves just being a handyman and at the beck and call of the business or any DIY requests I have in my house, to be honest. Um, so Jeff was there. I was helping him put up the frame because we hadn't put this particular frame up before together, and we were trying to put it at the end of the space where we were. So it was kind of like a gallery staircase. So the staircase came up the middle. There was a room off to the right, a room straight in front of you, and then a sort of gallery space to the left, which is where we were. So we were putting up this frame. Then I think we put the frame up at this point. We'd gone through all of the hard part, working out where the nuts and bolts go, all of that kind of thing. And the venue manager just came up to check how we were getting on, if we needed anything, and started proper like faffing, panicking, exhaling hot air, going off on one about the frame can't be here, it's too close to this painting here, blah 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 blah. If this painting gets knocked or broken, it's then detrimental to the curation of the whole venue. And then she referenced that this painting was actually a painting of national importance. I was like, oh, this actually wasn't mentioned by the person who showed us to the space where we were. Well, she should have mentioned it to you. Also, nothing can be against this tapestry. So, pardon? This tapestry is of national importance. It's over 400 years old. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, do you want us to move this trunk out the way then that was here when we arrived? Because this is actually leaning up against the tapestry. No, no, the trunk cannot be touched. I was thinking, I'm glad that nobody told me the national importance of this area before we started setting up and dragging our whiskey barrels across the wooden floor, because I don't think I would have been able to cope with the stress.
Hanging up a neon sign on.
Honestly.
It's really, yeah, stressful.
But safe to say that we secured 2 bookings from that wedding fair, so
It was really strange because there was hardly any footfall, and the people that were there, because we were in an old vintage house with all this beautiful art, our stuff didn't really go. It was
no.
it was hard to sort of say, well, this is what we do, because the people coming there had the vision to be married surrounded by books and history and stuff, but it worked.
It did work. No idea how, but
That's my actual epic sales skills, maybe.
I think that's what it is. I'm trying to think the worst wedding fair that I've been to. Might save it till a later episode.
What makes a bad wedding fair?
Probably being surrounded by junk.
Yeah.
So if you're, especially if it's a wedding fair at a venue, if the venue isn't prepared to welcome guests, don't host a wedding fair. Because for our business that we run, our bread and butter is basically barns.
Yes.
Our stuff looks great in a barn. It complements the natural surroundings. Even better if it's a barn on a working farm. That's just where our product sits the best. Outdoor weddings, stunning because it's all really robust. pieces of kit. So it really works in that space too. But if you are, I don't know, if you have decided that actually you're going to start tapping into the wedding industry and you think that you've got a really good space as a wedding venue that can host ceremonies and wedding receptions or parties, that kind of thing, great idea to launch and have a wedding fair. Honestly, that's exactly what I would do. Bring some suppliers in that you know from the industry already. Um, Create a big weekend based around this wedding fair, showcasing the venue, have a
Mhm.
ceremony set up, blah blah blah. You probably it's like if anyone's coming around to your house, you're probably going to hoover before they arrive.
Yeah, get rid of some of the junk that's piled in the corner. Make sure the bins aren't at the front door.
That's right. Do not have tarpaulin over a load of crap at the entranceway.
Yeah,
That's the first thing that people are going to see. And they're going to think, no, I don't want my wedding here. This doesn't give me wedding vibes in the slightest. So that's what, yeah, that is one of my top tips. If you don't get a good vibe from, especially because if you're going to a wedding fair at a venue that you've chosen or is on your shortlist to host your wedding, you're going to be looking at it from a guest experience perspective and from your experience perspective. So what does the drive to the venue feel like? Does it look clean and tidy? Does it look like they look after the grounds? Does it look like a wedding? And if it doesn't, are you happy that there's probably an engine leaking oil on the side of the road as you drive into the entrance? If you're happy with that, absolutely fine. Doesn't give off wedding vibes to me, but I'm not a mechanic. I'm not surrounded by engines and oil. It could be somebody's cup of tea.
yeah. Also the venue may say, oh, of course, this won't be here when you get married, and we are actually going to about to paint this wall, or whatever your issues may be, but you can't guarantee that.
No, and I think
So you
if
are
it's,
buying a venue as seen.
I would agree because if there's like a pile of old crap outside the entrance, what else is there that's on their to-do list that they haven't got around to do?
Yeah.
And when I booked my venue, we viewed it. You I probably should have worn my wellies because it was just the floor wasn't clean, like nothing was clean. It's basically they'd opened the doors after 500 years, smelt rank, it's disgusting. This is what you pay for. I was like, fine by me.
But you went in with your eyes open, and they
100%.
weren't trying to sell you that they were going to get the floors done and all the beams were going to be painted.
No.
So whenever you sign that contract on that for that venue, you're buying exactly what it looks like now.
They did say to me that they were looking to get accommodation built for the time when our wedding was going to happen, and it didn't happen. Oh yeah, yeah, accommodation is coming. We're just waiting. Blah blah blah. No, it never happened, which was fine because we hadn't planned for that because it wasn't available when we booked. So yeah, we definitely went in with eyes wide open. Um,
What are your thoughts on wedding fairs that are in sort of, like the bigger wedding fairs that are in sort of like the town hall, or the city, what they called,
City Hall.
city halls and stuff that are just more localized but not venue orientated?
I think if you are, I think if it's your first wedding fair, it's going to be wedding fair overload. I think you're going to come out more confused than you were when you went in. I think if you've got somebody who's been through the wedding planning process before, if you've been listening to this podcast, and if you are super clear on your budget and what style you're looking for, prep, then you know what you're going in for. And
Mm.
you probably will have done your research on the wedding fair and you'll know which suppliers are going to be there. And you might have been following them for a little bit of time, maybe on Instagram or TikTok or something like that. They might have been recommended to you. You might have seen them on a recommendation website, which I do not recommend using because those recommendations aren't always accurate. then I think they're worthwhile. But I think if you got engaged 2 weeks ago and you think, oh, should we go to this wedding fair? I think you'll just find it
Yeah,
overwhelming, too stressful, too many things to think about, too many options. Oh God, I didn't even think about napkins and table linen. I just think you won't enjoy it.
no,
What do you think?
I think I think they're good if you're only looking for one or two things. So if you've got your venue, you've got your dress, you've got this, but the last thing sort of on your to-do list is to get a photographer. Go to one of them bigger wedding fairs and just concentrate on the photographers and spend your time getting to know them people, and then you'll have a better understanding. But if you're brand new go into a wedding fair where there's 60 suppliers, like you say, it's just too much. Start off with a small local wedding fair where there's a handful of people just to dip your toe in. You don't need to stand there and book everybody there. I would advise not booking on the day, actually.
Hmm.
You need to go home and reflect and think about it. Don't let people, oh, I'll give you 5% discount if you book now. Don't let people push you in that direction, because you need to think about it and go and research them. But the smaller ones are easier to digest.
And I think you have more time to chat and get to know the supplier. Whereas those bigger wedding fairs, there's so many people to get through, so many people you might want to chat to. You could be waiting to speak to somebody. Yeah, I think you're right. Smaller wedding fair first, get a feel for the wedding fair circuit, get a feel for what you might like, what you're thinking of, get some ideas from other suppliers. I think we spoke about it, was it a couple of episodes ago, just on the sort of wedding cake hacks. You're not going to get that from their website because they're not going to promote that.
Yeah.
You're gonna want to chat to them and say, look, this is my budget, blah blah blah. I think one of the tips that I would say if you're doing the wedding fair circuit is make sure you get on the VIP list. Even if it's maybe a couple of pounds more for a ticket price or anything like that, you get so many discounts in your goodie bag because all suppliers are asked to provide something for the goodie bag. And most of the time, it's 10% off this, 25% off that, chance to win a free something or other, free sweets, free cookies, free cake samples, all of that kind of thing. And you could,
There was in the Lo and Behold wedding fair, there was I think there was 200 goodie bags that we did, and then there was between them 200 there was 50 pearl sets of pearl earrings that went into random bags.
what?
Epic.
Who supplied those?
I knew you were going to ask that, and I actually can't remember the company name, but we'll definitely tag it in on Instagram because they make beautiful shoes, like mother of pearl shoes and stuff. But yeah,
Why did we should have just bought a couple of VIP tickets for ourselves and taken our luck for the goodie bag?
don't give our VIP tickets away to our
Absolutely
clients.
not.
Just keep it for ourselves.
If I had known, then I would have kept my VIP tickets.
Yeah, and also the smaller wedding fairs, you do get treated a bit more. So you'll get a glass of champagne or a cocktail on arrival. You'll get a goodie bag. With the bigger ones, it's a bit more of a cattle show. You sort of get pushed in one end and pushed out the other. They're not very
Mm.
visual.
Uh, what do you think the value of a wedding fair is, to the bride and groom or the couple getting married?
I would say you definitely need to go to one or two.
Really?
Yeah, only because it gives you exposure to things that you might not be thinking about. So you might not even know that a celebrant is a thing, and you know that you've got to get a registrar in. But you, by going to a wedding fair, you would meet a celebrant and you would understand actually that's right for us. But you might not even know that's a thing. So you think the only option is for you to have a registrar come in and do the standard
Mm.
1, 2, 3, when actually you could meet a celebrant at a wedding fair and it could make your day. You know, you could meet the perfect cake maker that doesn't come up on your Instagram because they're smaller, you know. So I think it's really important. Even if you don't book anybody from any of them, they normally are free to go to. It's quite a nice thing to do with your partner or your bridesmaids, have a little bit of a day out. Um, but they do open your eyes to other things you might think about, or ways to save money or get you inspired, especially with the more visual ones. You might think, oh yeah, I really want that look, that color palette's great. Or so I would say go to them.
I didn't do any when I was planning my wedding. I don't know. Well, I do know why. It's because I was planning it in COVID.
Yes.
Did I feel like I missed out? No. But I know so much more now about weddings and wedding planning, not just because we work in the industry, but because we are exposed to wedding fairs. And like you said, wedding celebrant. I'd never even heard of that
No.
until a couple of years ago. And it's like, if it's basically like choosing your stand-up comedian of choice. They really add another depth to the ceremony.
They really personalize it, don't they?
Yeah, and I think if you're having it doesn't matter what kind of wedding you're having, you can pick a celebrant that will fit your style. So somebody that we know through the industry, Miranda, she is mainly booked by gay or lesbian weddings, alternative weddings. I remember her telling us that she once did a Wicca wedding. Is it Wicca? The witches, people that believe in witchcraft, etc.
Yeah.
And the bride and groom, it was a male and female. They jumped over a witch's broom
Yeah.
to seal the deal.
Yes. And they do hand tying where she knots ribbon round. You can have a cocktail at the front. She'll like make you a gin and tonic as part of the ceremony. Absolutely epic. I would have definitely had a celebrant if I knew they were a thing.
I'm not sure I would. That was the part that I just wanted low key. Just
Yeah.
quiet ceremony. If it could have been just in, that's probably my preference. And then have the massive party. But to have even like a master of ceremonies, you can hire somebody in to do that well
Yeah.
and to do it the way that you want it done.
When I was getting married, I booked nearly all my supplies through a couple of wedding fairs. Um, but there was this one lady who was making like hair jewelry. She was making these beautiful hair vines, and they were really pretty, and I just fell in love with them and bought them. And if I hadn't been at that wedding fair, I wouldn't have ever thought about me wanting a hair vine, and my bridesmaids having little matching ones, and my mum had a matching headband because she's a bit of a hippie. I just would never have found her and never have thought of that. And actually that's one of my fondest sort of memories of the day. So I do think you go to them and just find different things.
I also think that it's a nice way to include people who aren't part of your direct wedding party. It's like a weddingy occasion. So you could do like a one of the wedding venues that we went to for a wedding fair recently, stunning venue. You could see these people having a great time. There were people there for brunch, lunch, afternoon tea, but like boozy fun
Yeah.
for like hen dos, baby showers, birthday, all of that kind of thing. Really fun location. I want to go. So you could make a real day of it, have like a brunch beforehand, wedding fair, and then go for a few drinks after, or wedding fair, dinner after, that kind of thing, and really bring people in that aren't necessarily part of the bridal party. They're not mother of the bride, mother of the groom, blah, blah, blah. And you can share that moment with them as like an extended branch of your wedding experience.
Yeah. It's nice. And if there's a few of you, it takes off the pressure of it being a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
Because it can be a bit intimidating for people to approach a stand. where there's somebody stood trying to, because we're trying to sell you our services, and it can be a bit awkward. So if there's a few of you, it takes the pressure of you having to conduct that conversation fully, because you can bring a friend involved, and if it's a good person on the stand, they'll have a conversation with all of you and not just pinpoint you, and it won't. So if there's a few of you, it makes it less awkward, I would say.
And I think that you need to be prepared to be telling the same story over and over and over again. So the first question that Em and I always ask, who's getting married? So that you don't put your foot in it. How far along in your wedding planning are you? Because if you got engaged 2 weeks ago, we know that either you've always had a clear vision of what your wedding's going to be, or you have absolutely no idea what your wedding's going to be. So we can either talk to you of like, well, this is an option that you could have, blah, blah, blah. Or if you know that you're going to have a barn wedding, this is the perfect option for your decor. If you're telling us, yeah, thinking that we're probably going to have a hotel wedding, that's great. Have you thought about this supplier? Blah, blah, blah. So I would definitely say be prepared to repeat yourself, because if they're a good supplier, they will ask you questions about you. They'll ask you questions about when you were engaged. How long have you been engaged? How did he do it? Obviously, Em and I love an engagement story. Um, we should probably do an episode on people telling us how they got engaged, because I love an engagement. Um, and yeah, but just be prepared to answer the same questions from each supplier. I think it's also a really good opportunity to see if the chemistry is right between you and a certain supplier.
Yeah.
Somebody that we spoke to this weekend, obviously asked all the standard questions. How far along in your engagement are you? I think they'd only been engaged for a couple of weeks, but she already knew that she wanted a barn wedding, and she hadn't. I think they had a viewing booked at a barn local to where our bits and pieces are stored. And she was just talking about the barn I know really well, because I've nearly booked it for my wedding. Once I'd seen one barn, I knew that the barn was the way to go for us. So I viewed quite a few in the local area to where Ian and I were living. And the particular barn that she referenced, I knew doesn't have toilets, which was one of the things that stressed me out a little bit. So you have to, I mean, you can get some really great portaloos. The venue also comes with recommended suppliers. It's just an added element of a supplier to book. So I was just chatting to her a little bit about other barns that maybe she wanted to view to see if it gave her a different perspective, and also so that she had something to compare with. So if you fall in love with the venue, the toilets aren't always a deal breaker, because you could just hide them in. No one's going to be like, oh, do you remember the toilets at blah blah's wedding? No one's going to say that. You're not going to remember the toilets either, so wouldn't worry about that. And we were just chatting about her ideas, her concept, what she wanted her wedding to look and feel like, and also their story together, how long they've been together, how he proposed, all of that kind of thing. And as she was walking away and as the conversation was closing, she just sort of said, "Oh, I think you and I would get on really well." And that's ultimately what you want to find in your supplier. You want to make sure that you've got chemistry with them, but to a degree you are able to get on with them, and also that they're going to provide a service that complements your day.
Yeah.
And I think you really get that from wedding fairs. You don't get that through recommendation, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. I definitely didn't get that when I was planning my wedding. We arranged video calls because it was the photographer piece that we were quite particular on. So we arranged 2 video calls with 2 photographers. One of them had been recommended just because I put a Q&A box on Instagram, and somebody had come back to recommend this particular photographer. And the other one, I'd seen their work before because they did a wedding. I think they did my brother's wedding. And her price was really good, so it suited, but the pictures weren't as edgy as we were hoping for. So we sat down and chatted to both photographers via a video call, and actually ended up choosing the other one over the one that we already knew, because he just understood what we wanted to achieve, and his examples fitted our style a bit better. And He gave us a really good price for 2 days because we wanted him to shoot the ceremony, then the formal pictures, and then the second day from the morning. So that was like a 9 o'clock start the next day for him, and he'd been with us till probably 4:30, maybe the day before. Um, but you definitely get that at a wedding fair. You don't get that through
No,
recommendation websites. You just don't get that.
no. And
Uh,
if we just go back to the point that you made about being willing to say this, tell your story over and over again, you do need to do that. But also, if if your suppliers aren't asking about you and about what you like and how you got engaged, and they just go straight in for that sell, to me that's a bit of a red flag.
Me too.
If they don't say, oh, hi, what's your name, when did you get engaged, how along in the process are you, and they're just like, okay, I sell iPads, this is what I do you want it or not? It's probably not. It's a bit of a red flag.
Another red flag I would say is if they're telling you how much their equipment costs them.
Oh yes.
This cost me nearly 15,000. That's why my prices are so high, blah, blah, blah. Uh, if that costs you 15,000, you've been mugged off, hun.
Yeah.
That's not your problem as a couple, how much the kit cost. That's got nothing to do with your experience with them.
No. And
I
if you get an icky feeling with somebody, don't book them.
say not. Although I did quite like their product,
Yeah.
but would
Okay.
never use it.
You can find another supplier that has the
Yeah.
same thing that doesn't give you the ick, can't you?
Well, yet to be found because the second version that we experienced this weekend,
Also,
similar vibes but different supplier.
yes.
Your new boyfriend. Oh god. Any tips and tricks for wedding fair life?
Um, so we've already said, but I would go with somebody because they just help move conversations forward. Um, have have a bit of an idea about what you're trying to achieve on your day. You don't necessarily have to have a date, but have it. Is it in 2 years' time? Is it in 6 months' time? Because you will be asked a lot. Have you got a date and stuff? Just because the people there want to know whether because if you've only got 3 months and you're trying to find a florist, they'll tell you if they've got space or not. So be a bit clear when you're getting married. And I would say pick up all the leaflets and then go home, get on the sofa with a glass of wine or a cup of tea and just go through them and remember some of the conversations and do research after.
One of the so I've got a couple. One of the tips that I've witnessed, which I found fascinating, particularly because it was a bride and groom. This was their first wedding fair that they were going to. I think you and I chatted. I think you chatted to the bride and I was chatting to the groom. And I was just chatting away, blah, blah, blah. Also giving recommendations on other suppliers that were there that fit their style. Because I think we were talking about photography and just what he wanted to get from it. And he doesn't happen a lot, but he was very invested in the whole wedding planning process. And he had the goodie bag, and he also had his own wedding planning book.
Epic.
And I was chatting to him and just talking about the service we provide, chatting about what they wanted to achieve, whether they put their venue, all of the usual stuff, and gave him our sort of little leaflet that we hand out, which just is it's not a hard sell. It basically just talks a little bit about us and the service that we provide, and then a QR code to our website. And he placed that into the book. Great conversation, introduced him to a photographer that was there, and sort of left him with them. It later transpired that he had a system, and so he was sectioning off his leaflets and his conversations between the bag and the wedding planner book. If you went in the book, it pretty much meant that he really liked you as a supplier, you were a potential for a future booking, and that he was seriously going to consider you when they left and had a chat to themselves amongst themselves. If you went in the bag, no, no, no. Absolutely
You
pointless
were,
conversation. He's not going to book you and he's going to throw it in the bin.
yeah.
But I haven't seen that before.
That's really clever, isn't it? Because you do leave, especially if it's a bigger one, you do leave with quite a lot of paper. Because what else can somebody give you rather than a business card or a leaflet? You know, that's all we can give you for us to remember, really.
Or I Do Crew podcast suites.
Sweeties, yes. But you know, you don't get, we can't, what else can you give somebody? So segregating them out of people that you want to look at later and stuff is really clever, because otherwise it is just a bag of leaflets and you can't remember, was that cake lady, or was that the cake lady that we liked because she did that beautiful thing?
Mm-hmm.
And so segregating them as you go is top tip.
Genius. I
Yeah,
honestly thought this guy knows what he's doing after I'd
yeah,
heard, because his future wife had that conversation at our collaboration table about, oh, let's just see what he does. They were sort of watching the conversation that I was having with him, and I think she preempted that our leaflet was going to go in the book.
yeah,
And I just thought, what a great way
yeah,
to navigate your way through and to remember who the people you liked and who you gelled with and whose work you enjoyed the most.
yeah.
Excellent.
Another good thing that couple did was so we were in sort of like a marquee area, and that's where the entertainment space was. And so they had singers and bands have slots, and they didn't just sort of rush through. They'd heard this band playing, and then they took a break and they stayed around until they played again, and they sat and listened to almost the whole set without feeling like they were in anybody's way, or they just, you know, stood on the side listening and taking their time. And I thought that was really good as well, because sometimes you feel like, oh, okay, I've seen that one, let's move on, or I've listened to half a song, let's move on. But you don't have to feel rushed.
Hmm.
Take the time. And as they were listening, they were talking about, you know, what songs they could play at their wedding, and they were sort of in the vibe of planning their wedding at that point. It was really nice to see.
Mm. I think my final tip is approach the conversation of cash.
Yeah,
Because if you find a supplier, for example, florist, who really understands what you're trying to achieve, you get on really well with them, you've had an initial conversation about budget, blah, blah, blah. I think it is appropriate to talk about payment options and whether cash is an option for them. Because what you tend to find with suppliers is that, I don't know, what would you say the percentage is of people that do it as a part time versus full time?
oh, it's at least 50-50.
Yeah. So some of these people are working a full-time job and then doing their wedding supplier business on the side. So cash in hand is not uncommon.
No,
I mean, we've never had a cash in hand job, but the option's there, guys. But florists, that's how I secured my florist. I'm not going to name her because just in case, but cash in hand, because she had quite a few jobs coming in at one time, it was easier for her to just take cash on collection, which is what we did. So she had the brief of the flowers, we agreed a price, cash when we collected the flowers. It was honestly one of the easiest transactions. I think if you've got something that's maybe a higher cost, like your venue, it's not appropriate to ask if they take cash, because it's going to be a contract that you draw into them. But if you're a bit more relaxed about your cake, you're a bit more relaxed about your florist, you're a bit more relaxed about those smaller suppliers, I think having a cash conversation is appropriate if you do it in the right way.
yeah, makeup and hair,
Yes.
good one.
Yeah, makeup and hair, that's a good one.
And also, I don't know if this is a bit illegal, but anyway, if you're paying for yours and then you do cash in hand for some bridesmaids or something, so also speak to them about, how could we do this cheaper? What tips would you do for us to make this cheaper? So if you are speaking to a florist and you say my budget is £800 and they're saying, well, what you really want is more like £2,000, just say, well, is there any way that we could do what I want cheaper? And they may say, well, we could repurpose this part and this part, or we could put some faux flowers in, or we could, they might have ideas to help you bring the cost down. Like the cake episode, where the budget way would be to have a faux cake and then have that decorated, but then just have a sheet cake. So they do know ways to make it cheaper. And if the right supplier is for you, they may help you make that cheaper.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you know if it's the right supplier and you know if it's not the right supplier.
Yes. It's all about the people.
Any other tips and tricks, on wedding fairs?
No, just go local.
Yeah.
Don't go to a national one. If you're in Portsmouth, don't go to the NEC in Birmingham, because all the suppliers there are going to be either big national suppliers or local to the area, and then you won't find anybody that can really help you. You're not going to get a florist for a reasonable price coming down to Portsmouth to do flowers. So go, keep it local.
Maybe we should go to the NEC wedding fair.
Brilliant.
Have a look at the competition out
Let's
there.
go as a couple.
Yeah.
Just make up a date and our theme, and
Yeah. Just experience it. A little, mystery shopper exercise.
love it. Well, we'll report back, guys.
Coming live from the Birmingham NEC at the National Wedding Show. Excellent. That's it. This week's episode. Please like, subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on whatever platform you listen or watch us on. If you want to keep up to date with all things the I Do Crew podcast, please follow us on our Instagram account, and please send any dilemmas or questions or subjects you'd like us to cover off in future episodes. I'm going to make a note and just say that we want to catch up on all things engagements because it's one of my favourite subjects. It's the start.
Definitely.
The start of a wonderful story. But next week we're going to be talking all things flowers and florists. But until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
You've been listening to the I Do Crew podcast with Jen and Emma. Keep up to date with our podcast news by following our I Do Crew podcast Instagram account. Thanks for listening.